YouTube animation is usually just edgy parodies of well-known properties because no one searches for original properties no one's ever heard of. That's just the facts. You can't just search for something you've never heard of. And it's gonna be more muddled if you just look up new original animation. But every now and then an original property, perhaps a pilot, usually a pilot, breaks the ice and breaks the algorithm and gets a decent amount of attention. That's strictly an original work. And what do we got today except, well, that. Insanity Incorporated's The Red Eclipse. Now there's going to be some animation I'll talk about in the future which will be more or less obscure, so if you like animation, sub to Alecations.
Blot.
Gorsh.
Anyways, the premise of this animation has been compared to
Batman.
the animated series episode Almost Got Them. Basically, it's the rogues gallery expressing their personalities while playing poker, complaining about their collective nemesis. It even has similar dialogue about how they should kill them, while the original episode is about how they almost killed them. However, one comparison I think is pretty apparent that I don't see brought up much is Todd McFarlane's Spawn. Spawn, another dark animated series from the 90s, except it was really dark, R-rated dark. It was about as gory and violent as this short was, though generally speaking a lot darker, and we'll get to that. But that's not the real reason I bring up the comparison, it's the art style. So Spawn was actually colored on black frames, which doesn't just make it visually darker, but every scene is inescapably dark while looking natural. And I don't know if this implements the same animation techniques, but it sure reminds me of it. And yeah, of course, there's influence with Blot being a remix 1960s villain. That much is obvious. I wouldn't be surprised if an Encyclopath was based off of the Riddler to a certain extent, since they're both kinda gimmicky suit villains who think they're smarter than anyone else whose gimmick is just wordplay. So the plot, pretty simple, pretty interesting. Just throws you into a mythos we've never heard of from the villain's perspective, having a team up since they can't beat the Red Eclipse on their own. This kind of implies a lot of history, which I like. I do like it when stories throw you kind of in the middle of things. I hate introductions, though this does a good job at introducing them as well. They all have a lot of personality, but the framing of this as if it's an episode late into a series that doesn't exist is very unique. It introduces the characters, but it feels natural enough to not even feel like an introduction episode. Basically, it's just character interaction. All the gimmicky villains are shut up by a realistic looking crook who brings an assassin with a cool set of origami powers. And to prove their worth as an assassin, she kills a verbose villain's goons in the best animated section of the video. Plot-wise, it's pretty thin. It's a great catalyst to introduce everybody to the colorful cast of villains, and it leads to probably the strangest parts of this. I mentioned comparisons to Batman the Animated Series as well as Spawn, both of which are darker and serious properties. In addition to the lighting, the interactions, despite how wacky the characters themselves are, it's all pretty subdued. They're a bunch of weirdos, but they talk to each other like how real weirdos would. There's some playful mockery, some empathy, nothing too outlandish, nothing too cartoonish, despite one of the characters literally being an embodiment of early 20th century cartoons. The ending fight, super brutal, and gives me nostalgia to those good old-fashioned values upon which we used to rely. And by that, of course, I mean traumatizing children who were on the internet way too young, irreparably, and showing them gore and violence every 10 seconds of the YouTube search bar. It isn't super comedic, a few good jokes here and there, but it's kind of, well, it's weirdly subdued. The characters are a spastic ADHD electricity scientist, a lamp lady, I don't know what she does, a verbose asshole who's somehow even more autistic than the Riddler, a Pink Floyd's The Wall judge, and once again, cartoons incarnate, and they're just chilling, almost like a fake animated podcast where people act like normal people despite being animated freaks, which is a unique tone, but one that isn't exactly too far-fetched. And then that beautifully animated climax with creative action and the hot, weird paper mache looking ass. Where am I? Oh yeah, that's right. The ending's gory, violent, villain's reaction to whole things like a Batman 60s camp thing yet. So as an audience member, I'm interested, but if I were an executive, I'd be a little scared of this because I don't exactly know the audience. Even though Batman has gone through many iterations, they usually keep the tone separated enough. Batman the Animated Series was dark with pockets of comedy. Batman the Brave and the Bold was campy with pockets of darkness. But they were pockets and you could kind of ease into them. Here, it's a strange split between characters and it is a short, so in terms of tone, I'm not really sure if he can afford to convey so many tones in such a small amount of time. This feels like it could be the monsters of the week who kept getting beaten, meeting the Knight of Cerberus. The Knight of Cerberus is a trope, a villain that symbolizes a gradual change in the story's tone to something much darker. However, I do like the framing, the mystery of this world, and how interesting it is to see the Red Eclipse himself. And they're straight up not in this, which I also like. There's a lot of mystery involved, and mystery's good when you're introducing something because you're going to be pulled in and you're going to want to see what the mystery is. Biases aside, I think the tone might be a concern. I think going forward, Mr. Incorporated should try and make it clear at least what subgenre this is. Parody, camp, homage, grimdark, normal superhero action that happens to be gory. And speaking of going forward, so if this does appeal to you, I suggest going to his Patreon. I ain't sponsored, but hey, might as well help the little guys out a bit more. Every bit counts.
Do you even know?
There is only one more problem I would like to point out. The post-cred scene is not animated in the same oppressively dark way, and it looks just a little muggy instead of dark or even bright. It's just a little weird. Everything kind of feels a little smudgy and gray. It's a hell of a lot better than anything I can do, okay? Okay, let's stop with the negatives. I already went over the overall interesting Spawn-like animation, but I also love the roughness and detail. It gives an uneasy vibe, but also makes you appreciate the effort into every frame. The subtle mixing of styles while blending together seamlessly is so subtle, most won't notice, and if you do notice, you're rewarded with some references. Speaking of references, character design, pretty amazing. And the concepts as well. The old lightning lady being this energetic, canonically ADHD character who's an evil genius, but a little bit of an immature, passive-aggressive bitch. It's a combination of archetypes I'm not used to seeing. I'm more used to seeing stuff like a serious mob boss, and he kinda looks too much like a mook for my liking. I know he's supposed to be subdued and realistic, and he looks more grounded than the others, but maybe bulk him up a little bit, and at least I think the voice acting good scene. Well, I'll get to that later. The lamp lady is, I don't really get her gimmick, but she's funny and has a kind of grounded personality. The verbose guy seems normal at first, but he's actually the weirdest because his design is like his personality, compensating for probably being a moron by appearing fancy, or at least that's the impression that came across to me. The idea of being verbose being the entire gimmick of a character is straight out of the Golden Age comics, and I kind of love it. The plot is weirdly innocent for a villain. He morphs between several copyrighted characters, which I'm a little burnt out on homages to that era as of late with the likes of Cuphead, Bendy, and etc., but it does its job as a very fluid homage character. And of course, the one who steals the show, the woman who can make flat paper look thick as fuck. Yo! What? Sorry. The myth, the legend, the reason God gave me negative riz because my penis would get myself into severe issues. Origami. Even ignoring the down catastrophe that is me. Hey, person wearing an impractical skin-tight suit. Pretty common in superhero media. Don't worry guys, she is a person. The mask is just a mask. And her power set is really creative as well as her movement. Not only is it based on paper maches, airplane projectiles, makeshift swords, lots of paper cuts, but she can fold herself like, well, origami. And god, that looks cool. The flow of her hair seems really complex with all the different braids, but it looks very fluid and natural despite how some parts of the fight have slightly imperfect anatomy, so how perfectly they got the hair movement down stands out slightly more, believe it or not. I'm gonna look like the biggest hypocrite in the world nitpicking these masterpieces soon. Honestly, the concepts and power sets are the most interesting parts to me, for real, on God. I usually don't talk much about the audio, but I feel like it's worth it here. It's an indie studio. The gangster sounds a little too monotone in my opinion. Not even like a serious kind. He just seems bored, which you shouldn't do that. I think you should sound a little more intense and intimidating. Maybe add a tinge of threats while keeping the professional tone. Lamp Lady should probably adjust her mic a bit, as well as the verbose man, as well as Alecations. But it could be the intent due to her being muffled by literally having a lamp head. Encyclopath doesn't have the excuse though. His voice is perfect for his role. Misconduct's voice, excellent, ironically probably the clearest. But everything about her character is something I want to give extra props to, from the concept to making her lightning body flow like water. Her sound design, so good. Tapping due to her ADD, sounding like little volts, awesome little detail. Speaking of sound design, Blot's noises are also great, sounding like thick liquid whooshing around. He's made of ink, so it makes sense. Footsteps are footsteps. I feel like the fight scene could have used some subtle sounds for some of the attacks. It feels a little barren with the copywritten song just being the only audio there. Going forward, a lot of indie animation kind of focuses on the dark and macabre, and the creators don't really post too much, so this could be similar to that. It could be a lot of things. I think most of the things that would be pretty cool though. There were some issues that they had to re-upload the original short and unlisted the version I am talking about today. I don't know all the details. There's a lot of speculation that maybe people were calling the number on her arm, or maybe there were a few errors or some copyright issues. Once again, it's speculation as far as I know. Either way, I think we should try supporting Insane Incorporated and help them get that professionalism score up, as well as supporting their Patreon. Once again, I ain't sponsored. I want to give them a higher score, but I only gave this a 76. It isn't school. 5 out of 10 is average. 7 out of 10 is solidly in the good range. I want to give this something in the 80s, maybe even 90s, but given the way my totally not arbitrary scoring system is set up with such a small portion of the larger story, I can't really rank it much higher. Some of the mystery adds to it, but some of the mystery makes me like, oh, can I at least know the genre? But either way, I'd like to see more. And remember, if you would like to see more obscure animation, sub to Alecations.